Thank you, Laurel, and thank you all for coming. This is an amazing audience and one that's from so many different places. I'm glad you're coming to experience this because we have a phenomenal artist, and I just really feel blessed that this connection happened. Let me tell you a little bit about the art committee. I'm on the art committee. There are a handful of us on the art committee, and for 12, 15 years, we've been sponsoring gallery shows for emerging and well-established artists at the Dance Palace. They've been in our gallery there, and they've been very popular and received a lot of attention and given artists a chance to be well seen in the community. But 2 years ago, we ran into trouble with not being able to use the gallery. We couldn't have people come into the Dance Palace. As all of you know, now that we're being Omicroned in our second year, we really had to hold back and not do anything in person. So the committee flummoxed for a while and then came up with the idea of doing virtual art gallery receptions. And this is, I think, our 15th. And it has been really fun for all of us on the committee. And the feedback we've gotten is it's been fun for the artists too. It's a different kind of reception. All the receptions that we as artists on the committee have had have been those kind where you're there with your art and you have a couple of minutes to talk to each person, but you never really get to share anything about really the soul of your art. And what we've come up with is something that really moves in that direction. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about what I learned about Prartho and then pass it over to her. All of us who are on the art committee end up being curators for the artists. And so we've all had a chance to kind of, go into a conversation about what the artist feels is in the soul of their art, or what motivated them, or moments in time in their art life where they suddenly became aware that, oh, I am an artist. And so I'm going to share some of that. Prartho, and many of you obviously know her or know about her, was the poet laureate of Marin County several years back. She's got 4 prize-winning poetry collections, which she's illustrated. And then what we're going to see today is something that came out of what was called by her and other artists that were part of it, a pandemic roundtable, or kind of a way of expressing through visual art every day for 21 days what they were going through during the pandemic, or maybe not even what they were going through, but what came up for them on that day while they were in the pandemic. And it became a way to express creativity and foster social connection when all we had was a screen and distance. So, so this is something that she came up with, and she has 21 paintings, did one a day, but she also added a poem to each one. And she really felt that there needed to be a conversation between the color and the poetry. And so she put it together, the color and the words. So she put them together, and that's what we're going to see. Pardon me. In talking to her, she talks about most of her paintings being a blend of the mystical and the metaphorical. She paints to let go of a predictable world and discover what's hidden beneath. She grew up on the East Coast, and art and drawing was something that was a part of her in her childhood, but what she really used as a way of expressing herself was physical activity, skating on the frozen ponds of upstate New York where she lived, or climbing trees. She was a movement person, and movement has played a part throughout this art and poetry life too. So I'm going to give you a few of the little nuggets that she gave me, but I want to present one concept that captured me when I heard it. And that was that most of my life, she said, I'm quoting her, most of my life has been in the pursuit of the lost continent of awe. And I think that captures what you're going to get to see and hear. So I'm going to talk about painting for a minute. She had a mom that said, you should be an artist. You should grow up and be an artist. And she produced a lot of drawings and stuff as a kid. But when she got to college, she decided she wanted to make money instead of being an artist. It wasn't likely that it was going to work out as well to be an artist. So she pursued psychology and ultimately became a psychotherapist. She brought her art to their psychotherapy and did art therapy with clients, with hospice people, with a number of different situations, but psychotherapy was kind of the focus there for a while. In her 30s, she took off 6 months a year for 4 years in a row and went to India. And in that time, there was a moment in the ashram where the peers that she was there with, and she were given she described it. I mean, she just sort of described this thing like it was a magnificent dessert or something, but she said, I got this beautiful piece of handmade Indian paper and watercolors. And we were asked, each of us, to work with this and create a painting. Well, she did, as did the rest of them. And most of them finished quite, well, I don't know all the timelines, but much faster than she did, because she spent 5 consecutive days immersed in moving the brush and the water and the colors around this beautiful piece of paper. And at the end of it, her peers were just like amazed at what she created. And she had a moment of, oh, maybe I'm an artist. Maybe I'm a watercolorist. Maybe that's in me. And that was kind of an exciting story to hear about. Then what was the next? Oh, I know. 20 years later, after she was back, she had been there in her 30s. She was teaching poetry in the schools and continued with her artwork and applied for a local grant with the Marin Arts Council and was awarded funding for her to create, for her to cause a stir, for her to write a book and illustrate it called Causing a Stir, about the secret lives and loves of kitchen utensils. And this was another one of those moments where at one point there was a friend that came over and she had all these illustrations that she'd done and she just wasn't satisfied with them. And finally the friend was just saying, oh, just accept it. You're doing it, and she did. And that was another one of those moments. The other one that I think helped shape her confidence as an artist was at an Andrew Wyeth exhibit, where there were a number of unframed paintings. There were framed paintings and unframed paintings, and she got captured by the bottom corner of an unframed painting, and noticed that he had erased and redone and erased and redone and erased and redone an image that he was trying to work out to put into the painting. And it was one of those moments of, oh, you can have latitude in the way you do your work. You can explore different ways. So that was a way of freeing her up some, just in the way in her in the world of color and watercolors. On the poetry side, I love the comment that poems come from the knees when walking and moving. Sometimes a poetic voice will appear. Sometimes even a whole conversational line appears. So we're back to movement of the body, movement engaging something inside that gets expressed. And so that was a fascinating point of view. And the other one that I thought was really interesting, and this will be the end of my talk, is that she attended an opening or a presentation of Bucky Fuller's work, Buckminster Fuller, the architect and futurist creativity. And as she walked around the exhibit, she was captured by some of the writing that they had framed, put up on the wall. And there were pages of not like lined paper with paragraphs and descriptions on them, but almost a melange of words and cross outs and filled spaces with other words. And it was a message of, you don't have to just have it come right out. Let it ferment. Let all these things come together and it will be there. And so I asked her to bring one of those just to show you as we move into this, and I turn it over to her and she tells us about the paintings and the poetry that we're going to experience. So if we can get that, I thought it was fascinating. Yeah.
Here we go.
There it is.
There we go.
That's a poem.
Yeah, and there's more where that comes from. I mean, really, any page you go to is going to look like pretty much like that. And so that's been interesting. Thank you so much for that introduction, Rich, and Laurel Ann, for everything you've done, and the entire Dance Palace, and everybody who's here. Thank you. I want to do that first. But also, I mean, this is just such a conundrum because, I've actually had people say who are really like modern art, I think, oh, you should frame those. To me, they're a little bit disconcerting, really, what this is. But it is the way it happens. And it's made me, think about it since I've had these discussions with Rich in the last couple of weeks, what is that's going on when I'm doing that? Now, I was really encouraged by Buckminster Fuller because his pages looked a lot like that. And I thought, oh, there's one other person that thinks the way I do. But the other thing I've been thinking lately about it is that when I'm writing, and I think it's probably true when I'm painting, although watercolor is very different because once you've put a line on the page, it's going to be there. So it's totally different, actually. But when I'm writing, I'm trying to feel my way through, and I will go into places that I can feel, oh dear, almost like a dream, like I've come to a dead end. That wasn't really the truest thing I have to say right now. And so then I find myself, going up the side of the page. Oh no, this is closer to what, and I'm kind of feeling my way through. And what the recent thought I've had is that maybe it's not tangling, even though it looks like a tangle. Maybe this is what I do to untangle. This is my new thought about it, that I'm kind of untangling the mind that is fed by the news and by whatever else is going on that I at least get frightened about. This is kind of the untangling. And I think really when people look at my poetry, they might be surprised that this is the process, because I really try to work for very accessible poetry. I like to make it, I've often said I write for my brothers who don't really like poetry, and they do like my poetry. Of course, I put them in there, so that helps. But I'm writing for people who are not necessarily want to work that hard to untangle. So I do the untangling. So that's what I think is happening in there. So I think what we'll do is, that's probably enough introduction about my process. I hope to talk a bit about process as we look at the pictures. I will just say one thing about this round robin that started this set that you're going to see. And that is that it was a group of us. I did not paint a painting a day. I actually I think that would be almost impossible for me. I'm very slow as a painter. Many of these pictures took days, a week, sometimes weeks, even though it's watercolor. Most, I think, watercolor artists do paint very quickly. It was like that story that Rich told in India. You know, I had a piece of paper. For me, 5 days was fine on one piece of paper all day long. So I work very slowly. But what we did decide to do, a group of us, I was invited very happily to share my art. Actually, it was my poetry because they only knew me. These people were friends of mine from India. They knew me as a writer, not a painter. And I said, well, I also paint. So I'm going to put my poems up, but I'm going to see what I have in my archives, my paintings, and see what connects. And this show has really been interesting to me to kind of watch these two parts of me, the wordless and the word, you know, the paint that has to be, like I said, one, you have to let the stroke be there, and the words that I'm trying to untangle. So I think that's what we're going to get to see as we look at the pictures. Okay, so this I put out the first day, and it is the cover of a book that has the title poem. So the poem, this was an easy match. I actually did paint this picture for this poem. That's not a very common situation, although the next one I think is that way as well. But so this one I is about the poem. Let me tell you the poem because this is kind of an ekphrastic work now that I made for the poem. And this is about my brother. The book is called Indian Rope Trick, and it is about, well, I'll start with that maybe. First, I'll just explain the rope trick. So there is a legendary trick that I don't think has ever been filmed. You know, I don't know if anybody really can do it. There's actually a call that I found from the British Magicians Society asking for people to do it. And I don't know if anyone ever successfully performed it, but the trick is this, that you throw a rope into the air and that it has to stay vertical in the air by itself. And then you call your assistant to climb the top of the rope. And when they get to the top, they have to disappear. Now that has been kind of an obsession for me when I first heard about that trick. And when my brother was leaving, he had pancreatic cancer and had 2 years that were quite amazingly wonderful, on and off sick and on and off dancing. I got to dance with him at weddings, and we spent a lot of time on the phone. And the last time I spoke with him, he knew he was leaving. And we talked from the mountains, actually, and the mountains appear in this painting. And then when I heard that he left his body a couple weeks after my last conversation, I immediately thought of the Indian rope trick. And sat down and wrote that poem probably that day or the next day. And it starts like this. It's the mystery's favorite trick, weaving the intricate rope of someone's life, then lifting it for them to climb, and somewhere near the top, disappear. 2 days ago, my brother said he'd shot 9 holes. The pain was lousy, he said, but went on to talk about the conversation he was going to have with the maker and the jokes he had to tell. So this poem goes on like that. And it really talks about how, as we spoke, the rope of his life grew taut, and we saw the whole of it together. So, so that's the cover. I will also say this, I struggled with this cover. I painted about 3 or 4 different versions of it. This, I finally said, okay, we're going to have to go with this guy. I like the sky. But it was, you know, I was going for something, I really wanted the mystery as profound as I could. So, okay, so let's try the next one. So this is from that book that I wrote on the grant, or I started before the grant, and then I got myself to India where I first started painting, and I sat in the garden for a few months and painted images of spoons. And this particular, they aren't all spoons, but a lot of them are. And it's called, of course, Causing a Stir. the secret lives and loves of kitchen utensils. And this one, I again wrote the poem first, and the painting came later. And this is my granddaughter, who is now, what did she tell me? I think she's 20. COVID really got me losing track of time. But anyway, this was when she was not 20. She was probably 5 or 6. And she is the sugar spoon. And she is, that bewildered kind of look of arriving in a world that's sweet, but maybe a little lonely. And that's kind of what the poem reflects as well. So that's really, I think, my favorite of the pictures. There are 26 of them in that book. So, and this is one of my favorite paintings. I made this for my grandniece and her husband when they got married. Oh, no, wait, no, it was my niece, actually. That's right. I often give these days paintings for wedding presents. And in this case, this is often the case for me. I fall in love with an image I see. So, and generally it's a photograph. Sometimes it's something I see in my office, a little trinket or something, but this was a photograph of a chimp. And then I found another photograph of a chimp and I put them together. And I loved, again, that freedom of the watercolor, maybe, the same energy that's in my knees is in my wrists and elbows too. And I was just splashing around and I started to paint this. And then I often don't put the eyes in until the very end. And it's always a shock, like the eyes come in and they're looking at me. And that's how I feel about these chimps. And I matched this with a poem that was called Day of Distancing. And that one I had written very close to the time I was posting. And it was really about love. It's a love poem. And it was about missing my grandkids in particular and how I wanted to just die of hugging. So that's what I put with that one. Ah, it's fun to revisit these. They're like old friends. And in a way, it's so strange. You know, they don't exactly belong to me. They sort of came through, visited, and off they go. I guess like children, really. So this is quite an old one. This I painted. I think I was here in Marin County though, but I've been here now 20 some years. So it was at the beginning. And I found this photograph of some women. I think they were actually mournful. I think it was kind of a story of mourning that I saw. But I just love the intimacy of these women. And I have certain themes that continue to come up for me in painting and in writing. And one is trees. And I suddenly had this image that one of the women would be the tree, a redwood tree, which I fell in love with once I was here. And so they are sharing. It's called The Crone's Secret. And the poem I put with that is one that's called When They Arrive. And that poem is about an idea I had walking in the redwoods once, not so long ago, that if the aliens come down to our planet, they're not going to be asked to be taken to the summit, or to be taken to the leaders. They'll want to go to the trees. And they want to put their feet in the ground and drink with them, like that. So anyway, that I thought they played well together, that painting and that poem. And this is one of my quicker ones, and maybe you can even see that as you look at it. This I just painted in a notebook. When I go to Mendocino, which is one of my great places of worship, if I need to take a retreat, that's where I go. And so I always bring a notebook and a pad of watercolor paper, and I just, in my room, splashed around. I was looking at my calendar, probably an Audubon calendar, it's usually what I get, but they don't just have birds, they have bears too. And I just, did this sketch of the bear, and I call it Sunlit Bear. It's actually sold, a few of these paintings have been sold. And so I only have the print of it. But I paired it with, I think it's called A Day, that poem. And it was a really little poem. When COVID first started happening, because we couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't even park in our neighborhoods, actually. You could only park in your own neighborhood. So, but I would go to the lake and I would walk around the lake. And this poem kind of opens with, you open the day and look, a sack of what you've always wanted is at your door. Um, a sunlit hours with newts crawling through them, something like that. So I don't know, this has to do with sunlight and a day. And this one, what started this? I think really what started this was I had been to a recital of international dancing troupes, and one of the troupes was tango, and I believe this was a tango couple that I looked at, and then somehow I saw beasts in there, wonderful enchanted beasts, and this I really got into the blues here, and I did feel like there was a certain glory and also sadness in it, a beautiful sadness. And then I thought of this poem that I wrote, which is called The Temple of Sadness. And it was about, well, it starts something like this. Last night when sadness came to my table, I saw that he was beautiful, just like my friend said he was, my friend who called to tell me she was dying. So, I'm at that time of life when people are leaving more frequently, and I don't feel that I'm morose about it. Really, it's more just kind of the mystery becomes stronger, and that's what felt like I was touching. And this poem is called "The Temple of Sadness" or "Sad Goodbyes." The Temple of Sad Goodbyes. Yeah. And this is an older one that there's a couple of times I've tried to do wind. I really admire sculptors who can sculpt an utterly still piece of marble or something, and you see wind all the way through it. And this was sort of my attempt at that. And I did use an old photograph of my mother hanging up the laundry, although the figure really doesn't come from her at all, only just the sheets and things. So, and I love to clean. Actually, I'll just give that also as a little side tidbit. All these things have some root in me that sort of spreads in my life, I think. And the poem that I put with this is about washing the dishes. It actually says something like, love comes into the kitchen and turns on the light. The sound of running water washes the room. More than anything, she's happy, actually, and more than anything, she loves to wash things and set them out to dry. So there we have. The poem does kind of meet that painting. And one of my great loves, too, that I'm kind of haunted by are elephants. I have a couple of poems about elephants and a couple of paintings. This was a painting that was made for a grandniece and her husband. And I did this one also very quickly. I call it Elephant Splash because I just was having a lot of fun splashing and then trying to pull the elephant's face out of that splashing. And the poem is about, it starts, I think, with an image I had in India where once in a while you'd see an elephant walking down the street with something on its back. And in this case, it was sunset, and there was someone sitting there with a hay bale of straw on his back, lit by the sun. And it was just one of the most marvelous images I remember ever seeing. And so that image ended up in a poem. And then I talked about how I think, is how memories get, maybe, I don't know, for you, it does for me as I get older. You wonder if you dreamed it or really did it. But I think my daughters and I rented an elephant and sat on one once, and he took us around the ring. And then somehow in that poem, I become the elephant, willing to go wherever you want to take me. And this is the only piece that in the collection that is a drawing, and it was a pencil, and I did convert it to sepia in a photo program. But this was an assignment. When I got my MFA at Syracuse University, in my 60s. And I always have to say not the 60s, but my 60s. So just a little while back, really, I went and got an MFA. And my minor, we had to have a minor, was illustration. And this was an assignment to work with light and mediums. So we tried, I had the same subject, this girl, Mirji, and did her in different forms. But I particularly fell in love with this one. Somehow I love all the hairs that are falling out from the back. And I have a poem where I'm talking about a past life, just playing. You know, I love that about poetry, that you can just play. So another life, it's called, in another life, you know, I was a hermit and I fell in love with a girl in the village, and she never knew of my love, no matter how many messages I sent to her in the mouths of the crows. So that's what I paired with that one. Ah, another elephant. This was actually a possible cover for a book. I did have a book titled Elephant Raga. And Raga is an Indian form of music that's very improvisational. And the poem that goes with this, that was not the cover. And I do love the cover that my publisher chose instead. And this hangs in my daughter's house, so that's great, with her husband. And I just got to see it again, so I like that. But the poem I put it together with is, it was about when I lived in Syracuse and came back and forth. So I'd be in the airport a lot, and I would have these long flights and land in the snow, and I'd see these guys at the end of the baggage claim with their little signs saying, you know, are you Hernandez? Are you Moore? And I always thought, oh, I wished I could be, one of them would be me. And so in this poem, I actually pretend that I'm someone else. And then I start to say, you know, that I have a specialty, and my specialty is the lives of elephants. So, and this is another one of my favorite animals. I love giraffes. In fact, I just recently thought I've got to do another giraffe. But this one I did a long time ago when I lived in San Diego. And I remember sitting in the park. I used to sit in the park and paint. And then eventually I was part of an art collective there at the Balboa Park, Spanish Village, it's called. And I was juried into there, and I used to paint there on Sundays, and people would watch. And this one goes with a very old poem as well. I call this painting Your Dream Takes Flight. And the poem is something about know your heart as a mysterious egg, or as a golden egg from which mysterious beasts may hatch. So and this one was painted for a poem, and this was also a cover of a book. So the poem, the title poem of the book, and the title of the book is Call from Paris. And this was, well, the poem is about a phone call from my boyfriend when he was in Paris. And he called and told me, you know, it never stops raining here. That's kind of the beginning of the poem. It never stops raining here. The Seine keeps overflowing her banks. And then he goes into his own story about how the chants inside the cathedral lifted him up like a water wheel and sent him raining back to the world. So I was really hoping to get water in this. And I have a thing for poling boats, and you'll see there's a few more of these in there. I love that style of boating, actually, where you, for some reason, it's one of those things that I guess my heart has collected. And I love this idea that, you know, they're going to just, the Seine has flooded its banks so much they can just pole underneath the Eiffel Tower. And this one, this is a really new painting, but it's part of a collection. I have a little watercolor book that I bring to Mendocino, and I paint birds in that book, only birds in that book. And this is a boreal chickadee. And let's see, oh, I know, it's a poem that I wrote in response to something of Emily Dickinson, where she says, "Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul." You might remember it. And this was just a little ditty that I wrote during the pandemic, which was like something like, "Emily is right, you know, it's perched." And so this painting I felt really went with that. And somehow, this kind of painting, I'm just, most of the time, I'm adding a lot of my imagination. This poem, I'm just trying to kind of feel the light and this painting. And just, it's interesting to me too, because I was painting today, so I have the feeling inside me. I was painting a little girl sitting on the back of a tortoise, which is a commission I have. And, I'm just paying attention to the smallest detail when I'm painting a lot of the time, just how does that feather, is it fluffy or is it straight? And I'm just even smaller than that, the detail of that line. And I just keep moving around the painting doing that, and all of a sudden, there it is. Like I said, it almost doesn't belong to me, it feels like. And this one, I always, it's kind of mysterious to me. Sometimes a painting comes and it has a story, but I don't know what it is. What I did, I fell in love with a few images. One of my illustration teachers said that I fall a little bit too much in love with images. I don't know if that's possible, but there was this man's picture, and he, I don't even know what that expression is exactly on his face, but I was drawn to it. I was also drawn to the fact that one of the glasses was utterly blacked out, or reflecting out, and also there was a picture of a boy that was standing with a lantern, and I found this picture of a boat polar, and somehow they came together in this picture, and it really ended up going beautifully with a poem that I wrote about another friend of mine who had passed, called "Gone," and I call this, I think, "Guardians at the Gate," this painting, and the poem "Gone." I mean, like I said, I hope it doesn't sound so full of remorse or morose. I guess they're similar words. But he was 90 years old, so it wasn't a huge tragedy. It is how we go. The loss is big, and it goes something like this: "Gone. He left while none of us was looking. Our Chancellor Emeritus of the back road. He loved the back roads. He left among strangers and angels, his closest kin. By the time the body reached the flashing red hubbub of ER, it was already empty as the night would be with its owl sailing through it, as empty as the morning with its pale yellow light and the empty breakfast nook where he shuffled his kings and queens. Each of us were left to make what sense of it we could, but alone in our private precincts, I don't think anybody could." I'll give you the full one on that. And this is called The Temple of Bees. And also it's about dying, but the thing is, this woman that told me this story, she actually died and came back. So she was a young friend of mine who was drowned and then was resuscitated and came back. And what she said really was that when you die, your life flashes before you, but it's not what you think. And then she basically said, it's the tiniest things that go through when that life review happens. And so I ended up calling this poem The Temple of Bees, and this was a painting I made just in black and white. And this is tree. Trees I find are quite challenging to paint. This is it was a very large painting that I did on, I think, a full piece of watercolor paper in Syracuse. And the poem that I put it with, I love this little poem. It's called Inheritance, and it's about my father. And it starts with saying he was more tree than animal. And that he was rooted in the ground, and that his head was a clatter of something, and that thing that it doesn't show in the painting, but maybe some of you have noticed, like if you look at light coming through trees, even though the leaves are all jagged, like maybe an oak tree, you get these round discs of light at the feet, at your feet. And so that's what my inheritance is from my father, are these discs of light that fall through the tree. And this one also is a pretty old painting, very nostalgic for India, really. And I loved the water buffaloes that that India also loves. You know, they're left to just roam. I mean, it makes kind of a messy street, but you know, there they are. And I saw this picture somewhere of a woman with a pot on her head, which also I loved that gesture of women carrying. Sometimes they'd carry goats in there. You know, they'd have a big pot with bricks or who knows what. But so those are two things that I really loved about India. And the interesting thing, painting-wise, about this is that I did an entire underpainting in black and white, which is usually not suggested, but I think it really gave it the depth I wanted. And the poem is called, oh yeah, this is called The Scent of Jasmine, and it's also very nostalgic about India. And it has a few water buffalo in it, too. And this one is a friend of mine who had a childhood phobia about bugs, and so his way of dealing with it was to just become a bug expert. And he also loves instruments, musical instruments. And at the time I painted this, he was just learning a little bit about the violin. I think he's gone back to guitar now. But so anyway, I also have a great love of bugs, so I really had fun painting this. And oh, and the poem that goes with this is June Bugs, which is a poem about these little cases. Well, they're bugs, but they're just the exoskeleton that's left in the trees in the summertime. We call them June bugs. And as a kid, I just loved them because they were just so perfect and they were empty, you know. And so I wrote a little poem about that emptiness and about how they slip out of their bodies so effortlessly. Um, Nobody is as good as leaving their bodies as they are. Ah, and this is another example of falling a little bit too much in love with an image. I just fell in love with that pig. Actually, it was actually a picture, a photograph of a pig that looks something like that face, and then the rest kind of grew out of that. It was a Christmas card I had called "Imaginary Friends," or I think also "Photograph." I called this one. And here's another attempt at wind. And I mean, I'm not sure how absolutely successful it was in terms of wind, but I'd like to keep trying. And this one might be called Guardians at the Gate, I think, or Guardians of Dawn, yes. And this one is Event Horizons, is the poem I put with this, which I'm quite fond of because it's about 6 months before COVID. My grandson lived with us in the downstairs apartment down there, um, and I just loved that he was on his event horizon and I was on mine, and this also feels like something is stirring. And this is our last one, and this is poling the boat. So that's our third boat polar, and I didn't even realize that until I put this show together and then looked at it, that I had all these people poling their boats. This one. The interesting thing about the process for this is I took my first course at Syracuse in illustration was a problems in painting course. And so it was basically, I loved this teacher I had, and he just would try to give you a assignment that would push you a little bit. And in this case, I was always nervous about expensive paper and about I don't know, so worried. So what he said is I bought the most expensive piece of arch paper I could find, and he told me to spill coffee on it. So that's how this painting began. And then I had this picture of a bunch of people pulling boats on a river in the Middle East, but there was a tiny little figure in the back that was this guy. And I just exaggerated the boat with that peak, and it is one of my favorite paintings. In fact, just recently, we ordered a shower curtain with this painting on it from Fine Art America. And what comes with that one, let's see, do I have time to do the poem? Yeah, I think I will do at least some of that poem, is For the Drifters. And it is a perfect match, I think. And For the Drifters was the last poem in my book, Call from Paris. And well, it starts out, they say this, let me just tell you the story. It's probably better if I just tell the story. My friend Bodhi, who was the one who left when nobody was looking, and you heard that poem, he called me when he was 80 and he said, I just turned 80 today. And I said, whoa, how did that happen? He said, I don't know, Prartho. He said, I was a drifter. He said, I just kept drifting. And this is where I got. And the poem ends with something like, this poem is for you, the fallen, with limbs worn to silk. This poem is for all of you, solitary singers awash in your own song. Let the boat of your regret unmoor itself and drift away. The shimmer of harbor lights will reappear when that great dark ship floats out.
I was speechless and wanting to give a little space for silence in the wake of that beautiful poem. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So it looks like we have time for a couple questions. If anyone has any questions, we'd love to hear them in the chat. Oh, we've got a hand up. Stephen, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself or ask in the chat, whatever works best. There you go.
I think I'm much quicker talking than I am chatting.
Great.
Prartho, I noticed that there was only once in your talks about your individual pieces of art where you mentioned a poem having been written after the piece or about the piece. Did you actually have pre-written poems and there was no contiguation between the watercolor and the poem other than matching the poem to it after the fact?
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm trying to think. Well, during this particular 21-day period, I was just I don't think I wrote anything new. You know, I just, maybe there was a poem that was showing up because once in a while they were during that time. But mostly I was just looking at my paintings and seeing what poem spoke to it. So you're right. I don't tend to paint and then write. That's an interesting thing. Yeah, I would say that that's probably very rare. Maybe there's a place I could think about, but yeah, once in a while I'll write and then paint.
Well, the
But
Sebastopol Center for the Arts a couple of years ago had a show of monumental artworks, 44 pieces, Picasso's, Juan Gris, Nathan Oliveira's, and they were distributed visually to 44 different poets. So they had a show of ekphrastic poetry with the art. And this coming year, this year, they're planning on doing the reverse, poetry that is presented to an organizer, and the organizer is going to pick an artist to paint an ekphrastic poem, to paint a picture or sculpt something in tune with the poem. So I just find it fascinating that it appears that your methodology is take two separate pieces and match them.
yeah,
Both
I mean,
completed.
not every one. Like I said, you know, some of them, like the soup spoon and the covers, the cover art. I had the poem first, so I do that occasionally. But it is interesting. I can feel something in me that wouldn't want to do it the other way around. It's somehow the painting uh, doesn't want words, but the words might want a painting. I don't know, something like that.
Thank you.
Mm.
Well, it looks like we've got time for probably one question. Anyone have a burning question that they want to ask? If not, maybe Rich has a question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, if I don't see, and I don't see a hand, I'm wondering if there might be a poem that you would read. There was a request that there are people, somebody said that they'd really love to hear each of the poems. And so it could be one of those poems, or it could be one from the book that you just co-edited, one of yours that you're going to do for the, the poem about uncertainty, how to befriend uncertainty. I love that poem.
Well, then maybe that is a time for that. It might be the time
Okay.
for that. Yeah. So I'll do that actually. And I don't know that one by heart. I know a lot of them, but also, of course, everybody that's here, just so you know, I recorded every single one of these poems. So that's what the show is. So if you go online and, which you can for the rest of the month of January, and you can, look at the pictures and you can hit the recording, and you'll actually be able to see the entire picture and listen to the recording as you look at the picture. And maybe you'll have some new ideas. You can let me know how they connect. It was totally intuitive, the connections. I'm seeing more of them now as as I talk about all this, but it was just, I've often said when I teach is the same way. I depend on providence, really. It's like open the book and hope for the best, and often it works, that something is brought to me. So how to befriend uncertainty. I'll just tell you one little intro to this is that I wrote this poem for sixth graders. I was still teaching as a poet in the schools for sixth grade, and we were at the beginning of the pandemic. Everybody was home. Kids were going through everything that we went through. And I wanted them to write an instructional poem for themselves. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to give them one of my own. So I sat it right here, actually, where I can look out at my bird feeder, and I wrote this poem. How to Befriend Uncertainty. Come, sit in the seat by the window, near the birds who have shaken off their dreams and opened themselves to this never to be again day. Today we won't be asked to bumble along the beaten byways, for uncertainty is our house guest. Put on the water, set out the homemade jam. Uncertainty will listen with us as our bagels pop from the toaster's dark mouth and the coffee grounds weep their bittersweet sobs. Uncertainty is mystery's love child. No history, no proper name, but she has always been with us. She is the one who wakes us to drizzle new questions into our day, new stories, new colors and light. The wind is her breath. Her body is the water we bathe in and drink. Uncertainty, with her barefoot, gypsy, dancing soul, knows the unpaved roads to gratitude by heart. But of certain things, like tomorrow, she knows nothing. And because of this, her love knows no bounds.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I guess usually this is the end of our reception, and we give you a little bit more information about how you can find out more about what we just did, where sites that you can go to, and then the curator tells you about the next artist of the month. But this coming February, we're not going to have a single artist. Instead, we have been planning for months and months an amazing event that's going to happen on February 12th at 7 p.m. And I really want to invite you to come to it. And I'll tell you about it in just a second, but there will be a way to contact, I'm sorry, I'm losing my words. That's the problem with being 77 years old. Sometimes they want to go somewhere else, just as they're almost ready to be spoken. But anyway, Laura Lano put her address in there, and you'll be able to contact her and get some more details about this event. What we've done is put out a request to the artists in our community. We wanted to have art available that spoke to the collective experience that we've all been in during this pandemic. And so we described it and we called it COVID Cathartic. And we've invited musicians, poets, and storytellers to submit little vignettes of things that either supported them during this pandemic, or they wrote during this pandemic, or that they learned from this pandemic. And really, we've got 15 artists right now, and there are probably a few more that we're going to have. And for any of you who are interested, you can also contact Laurel Ann, and you could submit music you'd written, or music words that you'd written, or stories that you would like to tell, short ones, and you'll get more details on that from her. It's been very exciting for us to have that. We also have an event, or a piece of it, called the Learning Tree, where people will be able to describe on cards and hang them from a tree the things that they lost, or the things that they were silver linings, or things that would carry them off into uncertainty with some degree of confidence. And then we've got children's art that is based on their experience of the pandemic. So it's an effort to have catharsis for our community as a whole, to be able to talk what we've been through, and to know that we've walked together through this whole ordeal. So that's what's going to happen in February. I hope you'll join us. I hope you'll contribute if you'd like to do that. I think that's all for this time. I am thrilled that we got to have the show, and that so many people attended it, and that I got to see so many smiles on people's faces.
Mm.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Laurel Ann.
All right. Thank you, Rich. Let me see if I can do this for myself. Hello. Thank you for that description about the cathartic event. It's going to be really good. So I put the information, or how to contact me, in the chat. There's also going to be a lot more information coming out in the next couple weeks on our social media channels, so stay tuned. In addition to all the beautiful things said, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Dance Palace for making these art receptions happen on a monthly basis. This is our 15th one. So thank you to folks who are just showing up today for the first time. Thank you to folks who have been here for all 15. It's been amazing. And if you feel inspired to donate, we always appreciate donations. So I'm going to put the information there in the chat as well. And two more things I wanted to say, and I will let everyone go have a great dinner. I just wanted to say, as Prartho mentioned, she has an amazing exhibit up on the Dance Palace website where you can look at the image, listen to the poetry in her beautiful voice. And it's a really immersive experience. So I would really encourage people to go to that. You can see it by going to the website, and I've also put the link in the chat. And then finally, this has all been recorded and it's going to go up on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So if you want to watch it again or share with friends and family, you can check out our YouTube channel and see this reception. You can also see all the other 14 art receptions. So I think that's it. Prartho, do you have any last words that you'd like to share with the group before we
I would like to say one thing, just that I see that a lot of chats came in, and I was so busy with what I had to do that they're saving those chats, and I'm going to read every single one. And I thank you all for coming. It's just been wonderful to see people. I see people that I went to college with, Pam Lovejoy, for example, in Bowling Green, Ohio, and I have friends from Ithaca, where I used to work, and it's been a wonderful reunion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a great night, and take care. Bye.
Bye.
Love you, Prartho.
Love you.